Many things have come and gone since Wales last beat the New Zealand All Blacks here at the home of Welsh rugby. Anywhere. Nearly 60 years, for example. But a few things remain imperishable. Take the name of the captain of Wales on that day in 1953, the man they called the Prince of Centres.
Bleddyn's going over, and Bleddyn is over for Wales.
And how good was he? Well, he was as successful as John Dawes, as thoughtful as Mike Gibson, as smooth as Jeremy Guscott, as robust as Philippe Sella. He was the Brian O'Driscoll of his day, of any day. He was the great, the truly great, Bleddyn Willliams.
Bleddyn's going over, and Bleddyn is over for Wales. Bleddyn is over for Wales in the far corner.
My first recollection of a superstar was in the 50s when they talked of Bleddyn. He was very, very special.
Bleddyn Willliams, his name will live as long as rugby is being played.
For people in my generation, he was the best ever, and he's still the best ever.
History will judge Bleddyn Willliams to be probably the supreme centre of all time. It's 56 years since Wales last beat the All Blacks, and here is a man who did it twice in less than a month.
My father, who's now passed away, if anyone asked him what was his most memorable game for the All Blacks, 1953 in Cardiff stood out like a beacon.
He was a great centre, the Prince of Centres.
The Prince of Centres was born not into royalty, but into the large Willliams family of Moy Road, Taffswell, a village just north of Cardiff. Taffswell, on the River Taff, and complete with its well of warm spring water. 1923, an age of horse-drawn barges along the canals, tickling trout in the river, village life surrounded by ironworks and quarries on the fringe of the great coal port of Cardiff.
He was a true son of Taffswell, and I actually had the privilege once of meeting his mother, the dear old lady that gave birth to all these children, including the 8 boys. He grew up a great rugby player, both for Taffswell. He was spotted by a local teacher. He got into Cardiff, and, well, the rest of it, as they say, is history.
On the advice of Wilf Wooler, cricket captain of Glamorgan, rugby centre for Wales, Bleddyn was awarded a scholarship to Wooler's old school, Rydal, in Colwyn Bay.
Consequently, this country is at war with Germany.
From Rydal, North Wales and Cardiff, South Wales to Phoenix, Arizona. Whatever was going to happen on the home front in rugby did not happen, at least not until the Second World War was over. Any rugby then was played in the services, in this case, the Royal Air Force. Pilot Officer Willliams joined up at the age of 19 in 1942, and to get his wings, was posted to the desert on the other side of the pond.
I was trained as a pilot in America, and I qualified and came back, and I was going on to advanced flying school. But when I did go back, Arnhem had taken place, and they lost so many glider pilots there, and they had a surplus of us. So I was volunteered to become a glider pilot. So we did the Rhine operation. We dropped about 5 miles the German side of the Rhine. But before I went on the thing, I'd been selected to play for Great Britain against the Dominions, as they were then, and the game was to be played at Leicester, you see. Now the game, as it happened, was a week after we landed in Germany. But on the Friday before the game was on the Saturday, Hugh Bartlett, who was my CO, and Hugh Bartlett, after the war, became captain of Sussex, cricket. So he said to me on the Friday morning, hey, aren't you supposed to be playing at Leicester tomorrow, you see? I said, yeah, well, a fat chance I've got, you see. Well, he said, pack your bags. And within about an hour, I was on a jeep, and I was driven to the Rhine. Now, I went across on empty duck going the other way to pick up more troops. They met me there with another jeep. They drove me to Eindhoven in Holland, flew me from there to Brize Norton in Oxford. I stayed the night. I travelled to Leicester the following day and played, and we won the game. And I scored a try.
Not even Hitler getting
not
in the way of the rugby.
That's exactly what I was going to say. But the war was incidental to rugby football.
We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing. Today is Victory in Europe's Day.
In 1946, the end of the Second World War, he'd served as an RAF pilot, come back into Civvy Street, put his boots on again, and Leeds Rugby League Club sent their general manager to South Wales, and the general manager was one Edward Waring. And Waring came down, spoke to Bleddyn, and offered him £6,000. Now, £6,000 in 1946, according to the experts, is the equivalent of about 7 million today. He turned it down. He said to me, I almost went, but he said, I never wanted to go for two reasons. One, I love rugby union. Two, he said, I'd had a scholarship to Rydal School in North Wales, and I felt that had I cashed in my chips to go to rugby league, I would have been letting them down.
He stayed in amateur union in South Wales, but not just at any old club. Straight after the war, Cardiff entered a golden age, playing a glittering brand of rugby that drew admirers from all walks of life, including a wing forward turned actor, Richard Burton.
We'd be wrong, however, not to distinguish the gradations, and after the Second War, a Cardiff side attracted so much talent that it created a style of its own.
The mental picture that I have of Bleddyn, going back to the 1947 season, the wonderful 1948 season when he set the club record for scoring tries, was always when Cardiff were, say, attacking from the halfway line. What you could pretty well depend on is that Bleddyn would come off his right foot to beat his opposite number in the centre. Then he'd come off his right foot again to beat the open side wing forward who was coming across the field to try and nail him, having been told, you will probably have to nail Bleddyn Willliams. And then as the fullback came across, he'd come off his right foot again. So it is this triple sidestep off his right foot.
But one distinguishing, significant feature about him, above all else, in comparison to others, was the sidestep, the jink. And Bleddyn could do it and give a masterclass on how to beat an opponent by the sleight of his legs, as it were, as opposed to the sleight of his hand, and leaving the opponent desperate in his wake.
And then, of course, the post would be right in front of him, but instead of taking the try himself, he would then show absolutely to perfection how to deliver a pass to the wing. And in those days, before the spin pass, it was much more difficult to pass the rugby ball, the old leather rugby ball, and you just have to sway your body away, and you'd pass and move your body, the weight of your body away, just to make sure you've got a perfectly weighted pass into the wing, just here, below the stomach. So all the wing had to do then was to, catch it with two hands and run in.
This was no one-man team, a one-family team perhaps. Of the 8 Williams brothers, 7 at some stage played for Cardiff.
Bleddyn has had an affinity with the Cardiff Rugby Club for well over 60 years. Indeed, the family. I played with several of them, in Elwyn and Tony.
It was always something that Bleddyn encouraged us to do, to play rugby, and also to make sure that we did the things correctly.
But he was always associated himself and been seen on a regular basis at the Cardiff Rugby Club. He endeared himself to the club. It was his beloved club, and he belonged there, nowhere else except for Cardiff.
There was another brother, not of the same blood, but a soulmate, Dr. Jack Matthews, centre partner, hard, tough Dr. Jack and Bleddyn, the perfect pairing.
Him and Jack, they were an inseparable pair.
I mean, from the playing fields of the 50s right through almost until earlier this season, you didn't see one without the other.
We call them frequently here, the dynamic duo, because they always seem to be together.
And I can well remember, as a 19-year-old, having been chosen for the Welsh secondary schools to play in the centre at the same time I was about to make my Cardiff debut as a scrum half, and asking both him and Dr. Jack some advice on centre play. They both looked at one another, had a laugh and said, but they still gave me some great advice.
What a contrast. Bleddyn, who was all grace and artistry, and then Jack, the perfect foil, the man who would have gone through a brick wall, sheer power in the days long before there was any such thing as a gym monkey.
The amazing thing was their scissors move, which I'd never seen it before, and I'm pretty sure that was the first time that the scissors and dummy scissors move was instigated and played.
Well, put it this way, he knew what I was going to do and I knew what he was going to do. It's something between us, I don't know what it was.
The understanding came from about because we had no coaches, you remember, you see. We used to talk a lot on the field and weigh up the opposition, and then we'd work it all out accordingly, you see. And that's what one had to do in those days.
I never had a hospital pass from him.
International rugby had been on hold for 7 years. Now aged 25, Bleddyn was more than ready for it in 1947.
Well, he was a role model because he could do everything. He was outstanding attacker, outstanding defender. He had all the attributes necessary, and I think probably as a youngster, we all sort of looked at him as the model centre. We wanted to be a Bleddyn Willliams.
The centre was the showpiece, probably still is, of rugby. And as kids, like I might have wanted to be John Charles or Duncan Edwards. They were the heroes of the day. Then Bleddyn Willliams was very much part of that. I remember telling my PE master then, Bill Samuel, that I wanted to be a centre like Bleddyn Willliams.
He was a star, a natural selection now for the Lions. But there was a problem. As Wales strode towards the Triple Crown in 1950, and as that year's Lions tour to New Zealand approached, he was injured.
And I was in plaster for about 3 months it was, but I had to prove my fitness. And it was proved on the day at Bath when Wales played France the same day at Cardiff Hammers Park. And it was Cliff Morgan's first game for the first 15. And Morgan said to me, cheeky little so-and-so, he said, one way to get you, prove yourself fit, he said, score a try in the last minute of the game. And he said, you'll do it. So off we went on the field. 2 minutes from the end, Morgan said, are you ready? I said, yes. Off he went, outside the fly half, inside the full back, gave me the ball, I scored a try under the post. Williams is fit.
The Ceramic arrives in Wellington, bringing to New Zealand the first British rugby team to tour this country since 1930. During its 3-month stay, the team will play 23 matches, including 4 tests.
I was fortunate enough to go on a Lions tour in 71, and we were away what I thought was for a long time, because we had to play 26 matches over something like 13 weeks. But this Lions, particular 50 Lions tour, they seem to be away for an eternity.
And it's amazing today to think, I've just come back from a Lions tour lasting, 6.5 weeks, whereas theirs was 6 months. It took them 6 weeks through the Panama Canal to get to New Zealand. And then they would do the round of the world trip and come back via Suez, another 6 weeks. And to think of going away for that length of time really is quite extraordinary.
This, the 5th British team to tour New Zealand, is composed entirely of players of international experience. Of its 30 members, 3 come from England, 5 from Scotland, 9 from Ireland and 13 from Wales.
There were 13 Welshmen because they'd won the Triple Crowns in 1950. Now, we had no coach, so the 4 captains were the coach. Now, Carl Mullen from Ireland was our captain, but Bleddyn was the vice-captain. And they actually did most of the training with us and the management. And Bleddyn, of course, captained the side on many occasions when sometimes Carl Mullen was hurt at one time. But Bleddyn had a magnificent tour.
Throughout their tour, the British Isles team has played fast open football that has drawn record crowds all over New Zealand. John gets the ball and it goes out to the British Isles backs. The ball goes along the line to Willliams, who kicks for touch and finds it with a good one near the corner.
One day I wasn't playing, we were having a provincial match in the North Island, and we were losing up to a few minutes of the game, and we weren't meant to lose this game. And I'm sitting in the stands thinking, surely we're not going to lose this game. And just in the last few minutes of the game, Willliams broke through, touching underneath the posts, and we won the game. And I remember going in afterwards and talking to the pavilion, just saying, thanks, Bleddyn. That was really magnificent.
Athletic Park, Wellington, and the British Isles and the New Zealand Rugby Union teams take the field for the third of 4 tests. With the first game drawn and the second won by New Zealand, this may be the vital match of the rubber. British Isles win the toss, Scott kicks off for New Zealand and the referee orders a scrum at the halfway. The British Isles backs have it again, but
It would be another 21 years before John Dawes' Lions would win a series in New Zealand for the first and only time. But the 1950 tourists were to go down in history as one of the strongest teams, certainly one of the most admired.
The scrum cuts out 2 men and hands it to Bleddyn Willem, who races down the field on his own.
But I can remember Graham Henry telling me that his father had told him, having seen the 1950 Lions team in New Zealand, that Bleddyn and Jack Matthews, the best centre pair he had ever seen.
Full time comes with the final score, 6-3 to New Zealand, who won the
It doesn't really matter which era you're in. If you're a great player, you could have played in any generation, played in any era. And had he been on the Lions tour that's just been, he'd have been star of that side.
Well, he had created a great name for himself, showing the New Zealanders perhaps what a Welsh sidestep was like, as opposed to, shall I say, the Maori sidestep, which always takes the straight line, the straight route to any line, and no deviation. But he did that and succeeded. And then came home as if that was not enough for him. He came back, and in 1953, of course, famously, he played against the All Blacks twice.
1953. It was a famous year all round. Post-war austerity suddenly was brightened by a sense of a fresh start, of scaling new heights. In sport, there was the Matthews final, Sir Stanley at his dazzling best. And the Ashes were reclaimed for the first time in 19 years. And then, late in the year, the mighty All Blacks came on tour.
People talk about the fact that it's, 56 years since Wales last beat the All Blacks. And here is a man who did it twice in less than a month, each time as captain.
Cardiff's golden age was supposed to be over. The great team of the late 40s had turned into something more faltering in the early 50s. But not on this day.
We went to see them play at Llanelli, and we found that there was a little flaw in their game, and the idea was that we would throw the ball long into the line-out, tie up their back row, and then we felt at the time that man for man we were much better than they behind the scrummage.
Well, in the dressing room it was all a little bit tense, but Bleddyn then spoke, and he, eased our mind. He said, we can do this easily, we got the team here to do this, we got the half-backs, we got the backs, and he turned to the pack and said, it's up to you boys. And we responded.
Bleddyn always used to say they were underrated at forwards, but he always used to tell them, look, get us 40% of the ball and we'll do the rest.
Completely undeterred by this, however, Cardiff kicked off and proceeded to show in a thrilling match how the tourists can be beaten. Within 8 minutes, Cardiff were on the attack with Thomas sending Rowlands away on the wing. A kick ahead was followed up strongly, and from a scramble near the line, Judd made the touchdown. Cardiff, still with a couple of points in hand, continued to press the tourists.
Cardiff scored a second try through wing Gwyn Rowlands. Final score, Cardiff 8, New Zealand 3. Cue celebrations all round.
It was tremendous. The reaction was wonderful. I think we owned Cardiff for another fortnight. We walked up and down the streets, and people were coming up and patting you on the back and shaking you by the hand, and it was quite remarkable.
Cardiff had the better side on the day, and they fully acknowledged that. And it was a better game than the other one, as a matter of fact.
The rivalry between Wales and the All Blacks is as intense now as it ever was. In fact, today's intensity is born of what it was then.
New Zealand came over, they were 2-1 down in the series. They're probably about 23 up now in the series, but at that time they had lost in 1905, they'd won in 1924, they'd lost by 1 point in 1935, and they were thirsting for victory in 1953.
As All Blacks, we speak about that game. You're told in uncertain terms as an All Black, when you win, celebrate success, but park it very quickly and remember your losses more than your wins.
Well, it was something special because I was a youngster of just 12 years of age and went with my father to the game, and we were standing at the Angel end where it was all standing, but typically Welsh, we were all handed right down to the front so the boys could sit on the front row, so we had really a prime seat.
My father, who's now passed away, if anyone asked him what was his most memorable game for the All Blacks, 1953 in Cardiff, stood out like a beacon.
Just 3 weeks after Cardiff's victory, the same place, the same opponents, and the same try scorer. Sid Judd scoring after the same sort of forward rush, just as he had done for Cardiff.
A wild scramble followed, and Judd dived over to score.
New Zealand recovered, and the score stood at 8-all.
Ray forward tries to force his way over, but restraining hands claw him down.
If Cardiff's win was purer, more expressive of a certain style, Wales's win was gutsy, improvised. Down to 14 men, stand-in win Clem Thomas launched a kick, and it was gathered by Ken Jones. If Cardiff's win was the cue for celebrations, now the whole country went mad.
It was a great achievement, really, because we had no coaches at all. I still pinch myself, really, to captain two sides against them within a month, which is rather nice.
What we didn't appreciate was the enormity of the victory. To us, it was the All Blacks, something special. We had never seen anyone from another country before. And to come over and have Wales beat them was something which just sticks in your memory.
And Willliams converts the winning try. Wales have triumphed by 13 points to 8.
We're not expected to lose, which puts a degree of pressure on, but if the All Blacks lose, it's a national disaster. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jim Bolger, once said to me when I was captain, he said, Sean, when the All Blacks win, I'd love to be the All Black captain, but when they lose, I'd much rather be the Prime Minister of New Zealand, which sort of puts it in perspective.
Whenever I look back at Bleddyn Williams' record and realise that he not only played against the All Blacks, but he captained Wales and Cardiff, both to victories, and dare I say it, they were celebrated annually up until very recently, and why shouldn't they?
And one of the great joys I got out of being an All Black was the pleasure it gave to Mum and Dad, and they went to just about every game I played, except in 1989 we toured Ireland and Wales. Mum had to go by herself because Dad would not go back to Wales.
Time was running short on the field. He would retire with 22 caps, having captained Wales on 5 occasions and won 5 times. He really should have gone on the Lions tour of 1955 to South Africa, but somebody decreed that nobody over the age of 30 should be selected. The Prince of Centres deserved better than to be a victim of ageism. Perhaps it was time to look beyond the playing side of rugby. There was a trail being blazed. What to do next? Follow his young fly half, Cliff Morgan, and go into the media.
But Latterly have had very much better in the first half. In fact, it's been a very disappointing game as a spectacle.
And because of Bleddyn's fame and his wonderful personality, he was able to bring to that little studio in a chapel down in Broadway in Cardiff some of the most famous people you can imagine. I mean, for one day he turned up with Stanley Baker, the actor, Sir Stanley, who admired Bleddyn, as we all did.
I have Bleddyn's autobiography, and it automatically opens at page 37 because he says that if I hadn't fallen for the lure of tinsel and paint and so on, I might have made a very nippy wing forward for Wales. However, I think he was being overgenerous.
Bleddyn became the presenter, with his blazer, presenting Welsh Sports Parade on a Tuesday night.
Good evening. Tonight's sports parade comes from a very famous sporting centre here in Wales.
It was very pioneering, and Bleddyn, have no doubt about it, was very much part of how we established ourselves.
We could pick defensive players, as they have in the past, especially in the centre, but I would favour people like Gerald Davis.
Well, look, I'm going to interrupt you, Tony, for a minute, because the team is we just heard that the team is through now. Fullback Terry Price, Stuart Watkins right wing.
He was the image of BBC Wales television sport, and he carried that mantle very well indeed.
And then he wrote about the game for over 30 years with the Sunday People. From Moy Road in Taftswell, on the edge of Cardiff, to the centre of the city, to the centre of the rugby world, the prince of centres, and beyond to writing and broadcasting, and further still to enjoying a quiet pint in Cardiff Athletic Club with his soulmate Dr. Jack, or quietly watching from the back of the press box the retiring Bleddyn Willliams. But what peaks he had mounted in the middle, the twin peaks of 53, they set him apart. They defined a marvellous life. I was at a club awards ceremony in mid-Wales, and Bleddyn Willliams was the guest of honour. The club president introduced him, and there was a polite round of applause. I said, hang on, this is the player, the centre of all centres, who beat the All Blacks not once but twice in 1953, who was captain on the last day Wales beat New Zealand. So, for Bleddyn Willliams, not a polite round of applause, but farewell to one of the greatest players of all time.
I've been wishing today I could just run away out where the west winds come, with someone like you, a pal good and true. I'd like to leave it all behind and go and find some place that's known to God alone, just a spot to call our own. We'll find perfect peace where joys never cease, out there beneath the kindly sky.
And there's live coverage this Saturday across the BBC of Wales's game against the All Blacks. You can go online, tune in to BBC Radio Wales, or watch over on BBC Two Wales. Kickoff is at 5:15.
Rest of the world goes